Hey folks, welcome again to Israel Explained, this time with fixed audio. So, we're going to talk today about the reported assassination of Reza Mousavi, second in command in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Syria. So a little bit about the individual who was eliminated. He was the closest person to General Soleimani when Soleimani was alive, um, commander of the 2250 unit in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And his role is to supply arms from Iran and also from elsewhere to the Iranian proxies in the area. So the Iranian militias in Syria, and most importantly, Hezbollah in Lebanon. He also had a pretty important role in the Syrian civil war. He helped the Hezbollah and the Shiite militias take over Aleppo in the battle there, and therefore is also responsible for several major human rights violations as well. Now, his assassination is important because Israel has held off on killing him for a long time. There, from what I've heard and talked to people, there's no doubt Israel could have assassinated him a long time ago, but decided not to. The reason it decided not to was because it felt that by eliminating this individual, it would cause direct clashes between Israel and Iran, when up until then, the Iranians had mostly avoided doing that. But Israel has thrown caution to the wind regarding the assassination of Iranian officials recently. This is the highest ranking Iranian that we know of, at least, killed by Israel, although Israel has not officially taken responsibility for the killing. It's not Israeli policy to do so. The response from Israel, the lack of clear answers and opacity, and the fact that no one's denying it, make it very clear that it was an Israeli assassination. Sometimes Israel will deny doing this when it either hasn't done it or wants people to think that it hasn't. The assassination was a very clean one. Three missiles took out Mousavi. No one else was killed in the assassination. It was done in Damascus. Also, that could be considered a provocation towards the Syrians. So Israel was definitely sending a message by doing that. Um, Iran has removed a lot of the plausible deniability behind of behind its attacks on Israel and its attacks on the United States recently. Possibly feeling that the Americans and the Israelis are not all that serious in trying to deter it directly. So Israel's been trying to change that with its recent policy. This is the fourth Iranian official that I'm aware of that Israel has taken out in this month, despite the fact that Israel hasn't taken credit for it. And there's a few reasons that Israel is doing this. The most immediate reason it killed Mousavi himself is because in the last few days, according to Israeli military intelligence reports, um, there has been a stepping up of arms coming from Syria to Hezbollah. Now, don't get me wrong; they've been going the throughout this entire war in that route, mostly through the Bekaa Valley. But in the last few days, the numbers that have been coming in have been tremendously high. And that's something that Israel is concerned about because it may be on the verge of going to war with with Hezbollah. But there's also has been a number of direct attacks by Iran, not through its proxies, and that's a worrying escalation from Israel's point of view. One of those attacks seems to have been an attempt on the Karish gas field in the Eastern Mediterranean. Another is an attack on Israeli shipping carrying oil about 200 miles from the coast of India in the Indian Ocean. And two officers from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were killed earlier this month in relation to those attacks. They were involved in those attacks. The feeling must have been that that wasn't enough to deter the Iranians from continuing the attacks. Therefore, they escalated to a higher official than that. Now, Iran has vowed that it will reply. Um, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi vowed that, quote, Israel will certainly pay for this crime. Without a doubt, this action is another sign of frustration, helplessness, and incapacity of the usurping Zionist regime in the region, end quote. And the high rank of the threatener here is considered significant. So there certainly will be some retaliation, although, as we know, in the case of the killing of Soleimani, that retaliation wasn't all that overwhelming. So, with some luck, it'll be something along those lines. So, as we know, one way of describing this entire war in Gaza and in Lebanon is as an Iranian proxy war against Israel. The way Israeli intelligence officials see the struggle against Iran, Iran is the head of a sort of octopus, and it sends its tentacles towards Israel from every direction. So Hamas is one of those tentacles, currently engaged in very heavy fighting with Israel. Hezbollah is another. The Houthis are another. They didn't used to be focused on Israel. Right now, they are on trying to choke its access to the Red Sea and stop the shipping of oil in particular through there. And there's also Iranian militias in Syria, Iranian militias in Iraq. So those tentacles are everywhere in the Middle East, destabilizing constantly. And what Iran has learned over the years is that the people who pay the price for their actions are their enemies, Israel and the United States, but primarily, more than anyone else, the citizens of the countries in which these proxies are based. Whether we're talking about citizens of Gaza, the citizens of southern Lebanon, citizens of Yemen, all suffer because of what Iran does. And Iran doesn't pay a price for it. Other people pay a price for it. And so when Iran wants to respond to this attack, it may want to use one of its proxies. It very often does. It has levers that it can pull, but it could be limited in its ability to do that in this case. Hamas is very busy, as we know, and their capacity has been severely hampered by this war. Hezbollah is in a situation where if it escalates even a little bit, it could find itself in a position where Israel goes to war. It's standing on the precipice right now. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant in particular, wants to go to war with Hezbollah and is trying to convince the prime minister and others to do so. And the chief of staff has also shown a willingness to do that. So they may not want to do that. The Houthis, if they escalate, that could involve the Americans more deeply. So that may be something to think of. And of course, the Iranians themselves, as we mentioned, have made some attacks. I wouldn't be surprised if the revenge attack comes from Iran itself. Now, aside from the fact that Iran has been more open in attacking Israel, they've also been more open in attacking the United States, especially now with the Houthis. There have certainly been attacks by um, pro-Iranian militias against U.S. forces in in Syria and in Iraq. But now Iran is also directly helping the Houthis shut off shipping, and that goes to put it face to face with the American coalition that it's created in the Red Sea. National Security Council spokeswoman Adrienne Watson said, we know that Iran was deeply involved in planning the operations against commercial vessels in the Red Sea. And she added, we have no reason to believe that Iran is trying to dissuade the Houthis from this reckless behavior. The Wall Street Journal gave us some idea of what that help might be. It reported that the Iranian Navy was providing the Houthis with radar readouts and location capabilities in order to target shipping, and was doing that through the presence of the Iranian Navy in the area. One security official said, quote, the Houthis don't have the radar technology to target the ships on their own. They need Iranian assistance. Without it, the missiles would just drop in the water. So we have balance here. On the one hand, Israel and the United States don't want to get involved in a direct war with Iran right now. But on the other hand, this sense that Iran can operate anywhere in the Middle East with impunity, fighting in Lebanon to the last Shiite, fighting in Gaza to the last Hamas member and the last civilian, is something that really can't go on. The destabilization it causes to the region is tremendous and also potentially to the global economy. So the United States and Israel need to make sure that Iran pay a price for what it's done. And hopefully you also use this opportunity to undercut Iran politically by letting the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt into Gaza at their expense. Okay, so let's also look at some questions that we've gotten. Thanks for all the questions. I was overwhelmed by a whole bunch of them after the last episode. So here goes. Kathy asks, what do you think of the view that Iran is putting pressure on Egypt by threatening shipping routes? So as we know, the Houthis, as we just mentioned, are trying to curtail shipping in the Red Sea. Egypt is not its main target, but Egyptian shipping is being harmed. And most importantly, the Egyptian tolls in the Suez Canal are lower as a result. So it's significant harm to the Egyptian economy. That may not be the main goal of what Iran is doing, but it could actually be adding to the reasons that it is targeting shipping in the Red Sea. Iran is unhappy that Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are supporting an American initiative to remove Hamas from the Gaza Strip. They're unhappy that they're supporting Egypt less so than other countries. The U.S. convoys and military operation in the Red Sea to protect shipping. Iran would really hope that by putting some pressure on Egypt, it could stop it from participating in these things. I don't think it can. I think that for Egypt, making Gaza less of a threat to its national security is crucial. And I don't think that Iran can pressure it, but I think that they might be trying to. Heaven on Earth asked, here's a question. Can you speak to Israeli opinion and discourse around the idea that women and children, elderly, should be released first in any hostage deal? Is that being discussed and debated? Well, so the women and children and elderly first policy is definitely the consensus among Israeli security officials. The idea being that those people have less time than others to wait until they're released. As we know, some women have been sexually targeted, and there are other rumors about them that I won't go into. Some of the children that Hamas has not been able to produce in the first deal may be dead or in very bad shape. And then the elderly, some of them have serious health conditions, and it's very hard for to believe that they're being treated properly. On the one hand, Hamas, in many occasions, did not treat hostages properly, even when it could, as far as the health concerns are concerned. In some cases, they did try to, but even if you want to, it's very difficult to provide people with care and the medication that they need in Gaza in the war. So it's very important to get them out. Every day could be the difference between life and death for these people, and could prevent sexual abuse and so on and so forth. The problem with it, and the reason some people are against this policy, is because it treats the male hostages that are younger um, as almost expendable in a way, or as less important. And according to what some of the hostages have been saying, it's the males, soldiers and otherwise, who are being treated the worst by Hamas, that are being tortured the most, that are being held in the worst conditions, that are being driven to the breaking point often. And when it comes to sexual abuse, they may be experiencing it too. So it's understandable how this policy is, but certainly for the families of males who are held not who are not elderly, it's a very problematic policy. I don't think it'll be changed. I think the prioritization of women and children is sort of a basic part of Israeli policy that most Israelis accept, despite the reservations that some of us might have. Kievsky asked, can the Israeli economy handle a months-long war? Well, it depends on what we mean by handle, what we mean by months, and what we mean by war, right? Hate to sound like Bill Clinton, but the current intensity of the war is not expected to last for more than a month. I'm not sure that Israel wants it to last for longer than a month. I think that that is doable without a massive crisis. There's going to be some kind of recession probably after the war, just like it was a recession after COVID. Um, Luckily for Israel, it has a very good finance ministry, and the finance ministry bureaucrats there tend to keep spending within certain parameters, and that saved Israel from a lot of crises. And I trust them to manage to navigate the situation as well. After a month, fighting will continue by all accounts, but it will continue at a lower level, which will make it more economically sustainable. Because right now, you're spending too much money on the war itself, and you also have too many people who are not working. So once you can get more people from the reserves um, back in Israel, and you can use less ammunition, um, you can use less supplies, less logistics, etc., then that should be better. So my guess is Israel is going towards um, some sort of recession that will be manageable. If it were to continue in the current rates for many, many months, then it probably wouldn't be, but I don't think that's going to happen. Izzy asked, here's a question. Early on, I remember reading speculation that the UAE might get involved and make Gaza an emirate. What do you think about that? Well, I can't stress this enough, but any idea that Israel will have its chestnuts removed from the fire by having some Arab state control Palestinian areas is a fantasy. It's completely a fantasy regarding Gaza, which absolutely no one wants anything to do with, but it's also a fantasy regarding the West Bank, where Israel tried to get Jordan to take it over until it finally washed its hands of the whole thing in 1988. The UAE would not want to control Gaza for two clear reasons. First, it wouldn't want to deal with all the terrorism that it would receive there eventually, because if you try to run Gaza, you will run into terrorism. In 1956, Egypt tried to govern it um, for its own purposes with its own governor, and he ran into terrorism, the governor there. Um, and that would happen again if the United Arab Emirates tried to take over. And of course, if they didn't support the creation of a Palestinian state, there would be a serious lack of popularity in the Arab world. And being popular in the Arab world is a very important interest for Arab states. Right? When Egypt was removed from the Arab League after it made peace with Israel, or when Syria was removed from the Arab League for its Syrian civil war, it became the main element of their foreign policy to try to return to the fold, and they eventually did. It's hard to stress the importance of being part of a sort of Arab nation brotherhood for these countries. So there's no way that they're going to do that. And finally, the United Arab Emirates are a very commercial country. They want to make money, and running Gaza is not going to make them any money. They'd be willing to spend money to rebuild Gaza because that's good for their geopolitical aspirations, but they wouldn't want to take on something that would bring them all these problems. And that's absolutely not happening as much as Israel would like them. So anyway, that's it for this episode. I wish you all very Merry Christmas. If you like what I do here, please consider going on to my Patreon on Shael Media and supporting this YouTube as well as my podcast, History of the Land of Israel. That's it. I will see you here tomorrow with yet another of these videos.